Hello, everybody, and welcome to week one of the college football season and another episode of College Football Game Day Live. I'm your host, Thor Nystrom, and I'm here, as always, with the legend Mike Farrell, the godfather of recruiting and of Mike Farrell Sports. Mike, how you doing this morning?
Doing good. Just silenced the old phone, and I'm ready to make some people a lot of money.
Oh, we're going to make some money today for sure. Mike and I are going to be on with you guys for the next 90 minutes leading up into kickoff of today. One is, and we are now sponsored by DraftKings Sportsbook. College football has returned in all of its glory. Betting pros and DraftKings Sportsbook are teaming up to bring you guys a wild offer, and this truly is, to start the new season. New customers can get $200 in free bets instantly when placing a qualifying bet of only $5 on any college football game. $200 for free for a $5 place bet. To get in on the action, just create your new DraftKings Sportsbook account using the promo code CFBPros. Make a minimum deposit of $5 or more, and then place a bet of $5 or more on any college football game to claim your free $200 in bets. Again, to claim this offer, enter the promo code CFBPros at sign up to get started. Bet now before it's too late, as this offer ends on September 19th. Mike, we have a lot to talk about today. We are going to get to 16 or 17 different, I think it's 16 different games on today's card. We're going to talk about DFS. We're going to talk about props at the end. But let's hop in, starting with the 11 a.m. games. First one, North Carolina at Appalachian State. A really fascinating game to kick off today. This line has totally flipped from UNC started out as the favorite. It has now crossed the threshold. Appalachian State live is a 2-point favorite. Mike, what do you think about this game?
It's interesting because you wouldn't think, UNC Power 5, a lot of hype coming in. We saw what Drake May could do last week, 5 touchdowns and throwing his body around. You wouldn't think that a group of 5 program would be a favorite, but they've got a tremendous rushing attack, very solid quarterback play with Chase Bryce. And, this is a tough game. UNC's defense did not impress me last week. I wouldn't touch the spread. This is essentially a pick 'em. And it was a pick 'em for a while until it moved to App State 2. Somebody knows something, which I always say. They know that this is a home game for App State, and they know that they could pull the upset here with that rushing and balanced passing attack. That UNC defense scares me, which is why I would go over and take that over number at DraftKings for sure, because this is going to be a shootout. I don't think either team's going to be able to stop the other one.
I'm also going to be on the over, but speaking to what you're talking about of this somebody knows something, I think it's not only that, it's you have serious health issues already on that UNC team, specifically on the offense, although one key defender as well, getting back to your point about their defense. But let's go through these really quick. British Brooks is already hurt, the guy who was their projected starting running back in camp. He's done for the season. Antoine Green, their receiver, has a collarbone fracture. He's out for 6 to 10 weeks. He's not going to be back till the middle of the season. And now a part of the reason that I think this line started to move even more over the last 48 hours, we started to get rumors about the availability of both Josh Downs and Tony Grimes. So the team's best receiver by far, and then their best cornerback. You toss that in with the injuries that they already had. If Downs and Grimes miss this game, this could start to get bad from a personnel standpoint for UNC. Again, already missing all the different skill guys. You're breaking in that new quarterback. Drake May was, Mike, you were mentioning this. Drake May was one of the brightest spots of their last game against Florida A&M, in a game where they didn't have many bright spots, although they did get that win. But now he might be playing with a depleted skill group. And UNC's defense was the thing when you watched that Florida A&M game was pretty bad. It looks like UNC, regardless, even if Grimes is playing, that their defense is going to be bad this year. I'm with you on that over.
And they're young. There's a lot of talent on there. There's a lot of 4-star guys on that defense, but they're young and inexperienced. Grimes is a 5-star kid. I don't think he's going to play based on just what I saw last week and concussion protocol and all that stuff. It would surprise me if Josh Downs didn't play, just knowing him and his competitive nature. I don't know what the seriousness of his injury is. Marion Hampton's a good running back. I think North Carolina's offense will be okay. The interesting thing is here, the line moved, but the over-under sort of didn't. So everybody expects this to be a shootout. take the over, make some money. Don't touch that line.
Yeah, the line's a tough one. Earlier in the week, I was leaning towards UNC. Now I'm sort of leaning towards Appy when I see all the availability issues of all these different key players of UNC. But I think Mike's point is correct. I think if you're looking for value on this game, it's probably not had on the side. It's probably had on the total. And my specific bet, looking at over these two teams, I know that I cannot trust that UNC defense. So even if UNC's missing some skill guys, I still think that they're going to put up points through the scheme. And like I said, Drake may look good last time, but with all those guys out, it makes it a little bit harder on the side.
And last note on that, Drake May could get hurt if he keeps throwing himself around. I mean, we saw him, try to helicopter in the end zone. He won't run out of bounds. He could get hurt if he doesn't start to slide. And I know the coaches spoke to him about that last week. So the guy's a great athlete. He can run, get down, don't get hurt. Because if he gets hurt, then we got some problems.
Then we got some real problems. Moving to the next game, that's a noon kickoff, EST. Very interesting one. North Carolina State, everyone's sleeper darling for coming into the season, traveling to East Carolina. East Carolina on a much, lesser stage outside the bright lights. They are also a program that has been ascending these last couple of years. The live line on this game right now is North Carolina State, the visitor, by 12 points. We have an over-under of 51 points. Mike, do you have any thoughts on this one?
It's a tough game. Week one games, first game, breaking in a lot of personnel. I like the NC State defense. I worry about all the replacements they have to make at wide receiver, running back. Devin Leary's the guy. He's going to will his team to win. The big question is, will they win by, the line was 11, then it was 11.5. I like ECU here. I think they're a sneaky, dangerous team to keep this close. They've got a solid rushing attack. They're at home. They've got that in-state chip on their shoulder that they want to show everybody that they can play with the big boys. And I think NC State's going to come out a little bit clunky offensively, breaking in a lot of guys. Their offensive line is good, even though they lost Ikwanu. Their offensive line is good. They should be able to run the ball. But when you lose that many playmakers on offense, Devin Leary is going to have to get that chemistry going with new guys, and that could take a little time.
Could take a little time for sure. With East Carolina, last year, they cut almost 10 points per game off the points that they were allowing per game with 10 starters back on defense. This year, you have 8 starters back on defense, so they're reloaded again. You'd expect even a little bit more improvement on that defense. And they have, they're one of those teams that has one of these quarterbacks who's been around forever and holding all layers. Whereas some of these other teams, we've seen them swap out. Although, of course, on the other side with NC State, with Devin Leary, you have continuity at quarterback as well. But yeah, ECU has been building up to this point. For me, this game is an informational game. Again, both these programs ascending, but how far up has East Carolina gotten? I am pretty bullish on North Carolina State. You mentioned that they lost to Kwanu, but they're always good in the trenches. Like they have an awesome strength and conditioning program. They have good line coaches on both sides, frequently send those guys into the NFL. So I'm not as concerned about that. Where I have to stay away from this game is the spread's at 12. I think that's an objectively fair spread. My numbers think that that's an objectively fair spread. My number on this game is NC State minus 11.7. It's just a little bit too close. Even though I like this NC State team a lot, I can't pick them to go on the road and cover this spread. But then on the East Carolina side, I'm also having a little problems there. They have a lot of moving pieces with their receiving core right now. They also have some health issues there. I think Jai Hatfield's going to miss this game. And some of their other lead guys are new faces. So we'll see how they acclimate in with Al Ayers. But I'm going to be passing on that one.
Yeah, watch out for Ryan Jones too, Oklahoma guy. Moving from linebacker to tight end, he's going to be utilized quite a lot in this football game, I believe, and they're going to run the ball a lot. So I wouldn't touch it, but I do like East Carolina. I mean, man, it reeks to me of a game that's going to be a 7-point struggle for NC State.
Yeah, and definitely could be not the easiest sort of opening proposition here heading into East Carolina. So Mike's going to be on ECU. I'm passing on that one. Moving to the next game that we have at one of the noon kickoffs, Colorado State with their whole new remade team, the new coaching staff, a lot of new players in important positions there, travels to Michigan. Michigan has much more continuity, of course, but we have one of these inflated spreads. Live, Michigan is a 30.5 point favorite. The total on this game is 60.5, a little bit higher than we're typically associated seeing with Michigan. Mike, what are your thoughts on this game?
It's Michigan can play down to opponents. We didn't see that a lot last year, but we've seen it in the Jim Harbaugh era. He's got this crazy strategy of starting one quarterback this week and starting another one next week. I think there's a little bit of indecisiveness on offense, but they've got that 1-2 punch at running back. Ronnie Bell's back. The offense should be able to put up points. Colorado State is in disarray. This is at home. I wouldn't touch it because that line is so big, and I don't think Michigan at this stage offensively should be laying 31 to anybody. But if I had to pick, I would take Michigan to cover this game.
Yeah, it's and me too. I'm going to be on Michigan on this one. My adjusted line is just a little bit higher. Michigan minus 31.5. That's a part of it. The other thing is, in recent years, sort of, you don't think about it like this, but like very, very recently, mostly last year, Michigan has been solid in these spots where they're laying 30 plus. I think they're 4-1 against the spread in their last 5. That was a spot that Harbaugh had struggled in earlier on in his tenure there. But last year's team sort of flipped the script on that. And now you have this scenario where you're welcoming Jay Norvell's Colorado State team in. Colorado State, a team that played totally different before under Adazio. Adazio likes like the downhill running game and stuff like that. And now you bring in an air raid guy. Norvell's going to have more continuity issues he has better continuity than the typical new coach, just because he brought with him a quarterback from Nevada. He brought with him multiple receivers from Nevada. Like he pillaged the Nevada roster as he was going out the door. So you'd think they'd be able to start a little bit faster. But then again, this is a really, really tough scenario, obviously, going into the big house, playing against this really, really good defense. And then the offense of Michigan, obviously, with the pound the ball and the clock control. We're gonna get to see way more Blake Corum this year, after Hassan Haskins left. I'm trusting Michigan a little bit more, although I agree with your interpretation of the quarterback thing. I don't really know what Harbaugh was doing there. My theory, and I want to ask you about this. My theory about that is that he's doing that just because he wanted to save McCarthy from transferring over the offseason. Is that what it was? I mean,
it's a lot of these things you see, not naming a quarterback. A lot of schools aren't naming quarterbacks until the day of, and you're hearing rumors about who's starting. And you got to take care of the backup. And Harbaugh says it's biblical, but in this day and age of the transfer portal, it's certainly something you do. You do to keep everybody happy. So, and they've got their third game's UConn. So it's like they've got essentially, Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn. They might as well. I mean, these are scrimmages essentially. So I guess he could do it. I just don't disagree with it from a decisive standpoint as a guy that needs to sort of lead this team after flirting with the NFL. But let's talk about your hated coach theory, which you used last week to call Jim Mora and the Fighting Huskies to cover against Utah State. The Colorado State players hated Steve Adazio, hated him.
Yep.
So maybe they're going to come out with a little bit more energy, and maybe they do cover because of that. I'm just going to throw out that hated coach thing because it came through for you last week.
It for sure did, yeah, and I think there's something to that. There was one other team where the hated coach here where they played harder in week 1 or in week 0. I'm forgetting who it was, but I think that's a great point. We talk about like the schematic changes that are taking place there, and can Colorado State start quickly? But they should come out with more energy. The Steve Adazio thing that got stale almost even before it even started. Like you remember before they'd even played a game for Steve Adazio. This was over, I think, the COVID off season. The players were complaining about his practices. I had heard people in Boston, they weren't big fans of him there. They were not happy that Adazio walked out the door. Colorado State sort of gave him a golden parachute, and the players did not like him. And now you're going into a lot more players like Jay Norvell. He has not had those same issues in his career. Yeah. And the personnel should be better for him as well.
I got text messages from personnel in Boston when Adazio left, and they were so happy. It was just the happy. And you usually don't get those, right? You usually get like, oh, well, good luck to him, blah, blah, blah. Or, this sucks, we're losing him. It was like ding dong, the witch is dead type of thing. And he immediately wore out his welcome in Colorado State, So Norvell's going to be a good fit for this team. But again, I wouldn't touch it if I had my own money to bet. But again, Michigan should cover this on paper.
Yeah, and certainly where my lean is. I do think you can find better value on the card, just because there are some factors in this game that are unanswerable heading in, right? So you can't feel 100% super duper confident on your read. Just like, how quickly is that Colorado State passing attack going to get off the ground? Like, can Millen and those Nevada receivers, can they immediately sort of tick it up? Like, I'm talking like first half of this game. So Michigan doesn't just pull way ahead, initially. We'll have to see about that, but I definitely do lean Michigan for the reasons that I stated. Jumping to the 3:30 Eastern kicks today.
Yeah, two juicy ones coming up here.
We got a couple huge ones. The first one, super duper interesting. Cincinnati coming off of being the first G5 team to ever make the college football playoff. You're opening the season in Fayetteville against Arkansas. The books do not seem to be, and the public as well, as high on Cincinnati, maybe as Cincinnati deserves, or maybe as I am. And people are really getting behind this Arkansas team with Sam Pittman. The live line in this game is Arkansas by 6.5. The total on it is 53.5. Mike, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, we're going to disagree on this one. I can tell. I think Cincinnati lost too much. There's rumors this morning that Ben Bryant's going to be their quarterback there, and that's. He's an experienced guy, a serviceable quarterback, but he's not Desmond Ridder. The losses in the secondary are going to be difficult. He's doing a good job recruiting. They've got roster depth that they haven't had before at Cincinnati. This is going to be a competitive football team, but when you combine this with Arkansas's defense, which is very, very good, and a lot of people don't know how good that defense is, Sam Pittman's of playing physical football, run the ball. CJ Jefferson's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder this year because he's overlooked in the SEC a bit. Honestly, CJ Jefferson, and people won't admit this, and he won't. When the Will Levis hype started at Kentucky, it just raised his game even further because that's when in his mind and in other people's mind, that's unearned hype. And so that motivates players, and people don't know that stuff behind the scenes. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to cover the spread because he's motivated. But they're 6-0 against the spread in the last 6 games played in September. They start off the season very well. Even when Pittman took over this dumpster fire and had the worst schedule in college football in 2020, they still covered. Now, I don't like the line. It's mean. It's awful. It's horrible. But that's the way, gambling is. But I would take Arkansas to cover here.
Yeah, the line is predominantly why I'm leaning towards Cincinnati. But I think there's a thing that the marketplace is doing where they're focusing on the losses that Cincinnati had without focusing so much on what Arkansas lost. And of course, Cincinnati lost a ton, right? Like Ritter, Ford, Pierce on defense, Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant, Cook. Like those are 3 highly, defensive backs, highly drafted defensive backs, and then Majay Sanders, their best pass rusher. So I certainly get that. But on the other side, Arkansas lost Treylon Burks, the guy that they funneled all the touches to move the offense in recent years, and then their defense isn't bringing back as many guys. They went into the portal, of course, and they're trying to patch it together for sure. I just think like the losses were more analogous maybe than the market made it seem. Not analogous, but the drop wasn't quite as much, especially because Cincinnati got a top 20. They signed a top 25 high school recruiting class. They also, I think, were pretty close to signing a top 25 transfer portal class if they weren't. You mentioned the Ben Bryant thing. You get Ben Bryant from EMU, but Ben Bryant had originally signed with Cincinnati, so there's no continuity issues there. They have a deep stable of in the backfield, although it looks like Kiner has not won that starting job coming out. He'll certainly be in the rotation. Nicked up a little bit in camp, but one of those they have 2 different Montgomery kids, and one of them got named the starting job there. But it looks like it's going to be more of a 4-man rotation this coming year. I do like Cincinnati with those points. I think that they can keep it close within the number. Fickell's developmental system has been great. So it's not just the guys that they're bringing in. I do think that there's some ready-made replacements there as well. And you're talking two of the best coaches in terms of in-game in college football playing here. Two guys that neither of these guys are going to get blown out, at this point. So I do like Cincinnati to stay within this number. The over-under, I don't see as much value on the total. I would also skew, like my numbers on this game are a little bit higher for the total. My adjusted total on it is 58. But I would also skew a little bit lower, again, just because of some of these personnel losses that we saw on both these teams, with Treylon leaving and then, Ritter and Pierce on the other side, et cetera. So Mike is going to be on Arkansas in this game. I'm going to be on Cincinnati. I didn't fare as well last week when I tried to oppose Mike on a couple games, specifically the New Mexico State Nevada game late. We had a lock on that one, and
you can't bet on New Mexico State. I'm sorry. I just told you it was irresponsible of you, and you shouldn't have done it. And you've learned your lesson. But this game, 6.5 is where it's at now. I love that because it was at 7. 7's a horrible number. It could be push city. One fat guy stat for you, because I'm a fat guy and I love fat guys. The Arkansas offensive line average is around 315 pounds. The Cincinnati defensive line is about 270. I think they're just going to lean on them, wear them down. That 1-2 punch at running back is going to sort of take over in the fourth quarter, and I see a 10-point victory.
Mike, let me ask you something before we move on to the next game. KJ Jefferson, do you view him as an NFL prospect, or do you view him as more of like a quadruple A guy who's a really good college quarterback who, his game isn't going to completely translate?
Yeah, I mean, he's a quality college football quarterback. I don't see him as a pro guy. I don't see the physical ability there. I don't see the arm strength. I don't see the zip. I don't see those things. But I see him as a very difficult quarterback to game plan for, and a gamer, and those guys are dangerous in college. But, somebody will take a flyer on him, 6th, 7th round, depending on how his combine goes and all that stuff. But I don't see him as a pro prospect. When you looked at Ritter last year, he blew off the screen as a pro guy. And the more you watched him, the better he was. CJ, the more you watch him, the more you find faults. And I know I told you he's motivated, with the Will Levis hype. But when you look at Will Levis and his arm compared to CJ, it's just not. There's no comparison there.
No, yeah. Will Levis has a friggin' bazooka.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that guy can throw the ball through a wall. Now we're moving to one of the marquee games of today. Oregon. I was going to say at Georgia. They're playing Georgia. It's in
Wildy, right?
Yeah. Basically, you have a quasi home field situation going on. This game is in Atlanta, not in Athens. So, again, more you wouldn't go full home field advantage on Georgia like in your power ratings, but maybe like a half of one with the game being down there. Lots of things going on here. The Oregon head coach that's coming in was the architect of Georgia's historic defense from last year that won the title, and Dan Lanning. He obviously knows the personnel well, but he does not have the horses that his former boss did, Kirby Smart at Georgia. This line right now live, it's either 17 or 16.5. I've seen it sort of toggling. It had been at 17.5. So that shows you that the market has been putting some money on Oregon coming in. We have a total of 54. What are your thoughts on this one, Mike?
It's 16 right now.
Ooh,
yeah,
live some movement this morning.
And live on DraftKings, and that is
wow.
A lot of the money is on Oregon, so that line is dipping a little bit. And so when you look at this game, this is one of those where somebody knows something type of thing. Because I look at this, and I know your adjusted spread on this. Let me take a look here. Is
a little bit lower.
You're in line with me, man. I mean, I look at this game and I look at this matchup and I look at the personnel and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is a 10 to 12 point spread. So then when you see it and it's 17.5, what you should do in that case is, bet Oregon. Wow, 6 points off of my regular line. Wow. But then you pause as a experienced gambler, and somebody somewhere knows something that you don't, and you take Georgia. Now, I wouldn't touch this game because of that line is so wonky, but I do love the under, and I'll tell you why. The under right now is 55. Dan Lanning knows this defense. He knows this offense. He's going to be able to sort of keep his team in the mix here. He's going to play a football game that plays to the weaknesses of Georgia in all those respects. Georgia's not as fast to the football this year, and he knows it, at least at the secondary, in the linebacker group. So he's going to work the middle of the field. He's going to move the chains. It's not going to be monotonous, but he's going to play ball control. He's going to play smart, and he's not going to let that Georgia defense tee off because he knows what can happen. Defensively, Justin Flo, everything I've heard is he's healthy and he's going to just destroy some people. I have him. I wish there was an over-under on personal foul penalties because I would have him at 1.5 and I would take the over. He's an animal, just an animal. And he's so angry that he wasn't able to play, over the last couple of years consistently because of the injuries. You've got Sewell. You've got a really SEC build defense. Mario Cristobal, when I talked to him at Oregon, told me he wanted to build this defense in the mold of the SEC. I don't think they're going to be able to hang. I think they're going to lose. But I love the under because of Lanning's knowledge, and the game plan that they're going to come out with here is going to keep that number low.
Well, now that we're sponsored by DraftKings Sportsbook, maybe we can talk to them about getting a adjusted personal foul. Yeah, we can talk to them about like specific player props. It'd be fun. To your point, Cristobal left the cupboard pretty dang full for Mr. Dan Lanning. You mentioned the defensive playmakers that they're leaving. I think that's a really important point because I think a casual fan looks at Oregon and they're like, well, they lost Thibodeau, and so they're going to fall off on defense. I'm not sure that that's the case. The linebacking core, and then who's the other kid? Sewell next to Flo?
No, Sewell, yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
that's linebacker in college football. Him and Trenton Simpson, 1-2.
Yeah, Oregon, you put their linebacking core up with anybody. Their secondary is pretty solid too, and you would think the defensive line would fall off, but when you look at the advanced numbers last year of Oregon's defensive line, recall Kayvon Thibodeau was sort of in and out of the lineup. If you look at their aggregate numbers, their Havoc rate numbers actually were not very good, and their adjusted line yards, the amount of yards that you either credit for the offensive line or the defensive line, independent of what the running back is doing, that wasn't very good for Oregon last year either. So just mathematically, statistically, data-wise, they are almost assuredly going to improve on the defensive line, even without Thibodeau. And Brandon
Dorlus is a name to remember.
Remember that name. Absolutely.
So good.
So you're talking about a defense that should get better. And again, now it's overseen by this guy who just oversaw one of the great modern defenses that we've ever seen. The thing for me with because I am taking those points with Oregon, I got a Oregon plus 17.5 ticket in my pocket, metaphorically. But the one thing that I'm concerned about, flipping it to the other units, the other side of the field, it's Bo Nix, right? Like Oregon gets rid of Anthony Brown graduated. Anthony Brown was like the most average quarterback, like literally average, like in every sort of delta line. He was always in the middle of like everything. He's like, he has sort of average mobility, in terms of like everything, is how much he was using his legs, average thrower, like it was just, you were hitting the ball down the fairway, but not very far with Anthony Brown. Whereas with Bo Nix, he's one of those drivers that's going in and out of the lanes at like high speeds. You get more of a high variance thing. With Bo Nix, the ceiling of that offense goes up for sure, but it's at the cost of extreme variance. And what they're hoping for is in one of these big games, like maybe this one, that you're not going to see a thing where it's like, you have turnovers on consecutive possessions, and all of a sudden Bo Nix is like his head is down. He's sort of going into the tank. Then his timing starts to get all wonky. He's missing his reads. He's overthrowing people by 30 yards or, putting it over the wrong shoulder, stuff like that. That's the bad Bo Nix. But, you do have to do that variant stuff. Mike, what do you think of Bo Nix, like Dan Lanning, after seeing Bo Nix up close for several years in the SEC, he chose Bo Nix to come up there. I mean, he could have gone after one of these million other quarterbacks that were in the portal. It was a surprise to me when Bo Nix signed with Oregon. I don't know if it was to you, but what do you think led Dan Lanning with Bo Nix? And are you bullish on that, or are you low on the idea of that?
I'm low on the idea, but it's Kenny Dillingham. I mean, he worked with him at Auburn. He recruited him to Auburn. They have a really good connection there. Ty Thompson is a 5-star quarterback. That's the backup, super talented kid. He's going to see time, I think, in this game as well. Maybe some different packages. But it's pretty much that relationship between Dillingham and Bo Nix. The problem with Bo Nix I have in this game is that when you're pressured, you're going to try to do too much, and he's going to be pressured. I mean, Nolan Smith and those guys are going to come off the edge. They're going to get pressure up the middle from Jalen Carter. He's going to be running around and possibly make some bad mistakes. And if he does that throws your 17.5 off a little bit. Sometimes it could throw the under off a little bit too. So what you got to hope for, if you're betting the under or if you're taking Oregon to cover, you have to hope that Bo Nix plays within himself and that he's got a newfound maturity and a new home. Now, you remember the Auburn offensive line was awful. I mean, Gus Malzahn stopped recruiting offensive line for some reason for a couple of years. He took like 2 1 year and 3 the next, and they had no depth. This is a good offensive line. I mean, TJ Bass, Alex Forsyth up front. This is Mario Cristobal's bread and butter. So Bo's going to have a little bit more protection than he's used to, and you hope he doesn't make as many mistakes with that.
1,000%, yeah. And if that pressure starts getting to Bo Nix, that is the danger zone. Because even though Georgia lost some guys from their secondary to the NFL, Ringo coming back might be the best corner in college football. Like they got plenty of ball hogs back there. So if we get bad Bo Nix tonight, that's where the turnovers could start. But again, for me, it's just too many points considering the historic amount of talent that Georgia lost. The 5 first-round defenders, I think 18 total guys drafted and everything like that. In lieu of that, and then in lieu of the fact that you're facing your former defensive coordinator that knows your returning personnel pretty good, I just think the number's a little bit too high. But the market is correcting on this a little bit. Like you said, it's gone from 17.5 to 16 just over the last 36 hours or so. So
yeah.
But I would still lean Oregon just because my like I said, my number on this game is Georgia -11. So that's the way that I would be leaning. Going to another game in the same window, 3:30 Eastern. We just talked about it, some of the bigger Power 5 teams. This is more your marquee G5 showdown with Houston traveling to UTSA, 2 very interesting Texas teams that both of them were super duper successful last year. They both had double-digit wins last season, but they both lost a lot over the offseason. So you're wondering, what are they going to be in translation? Houston is a 4-point road favorite heading into UTSA today. Last time I saw the line. What are your thoughts on this game, Mike?
I just changed my mind on it, actually. I had it at pass. Hopefully there's not a graphics person out there that's going to be upset about this, but I looked at it again, and it's got great quarterback play. There's still dynamic playmakers at wide receiver. So I don't like the line, but I do like the over. And I know that you do as well. It's going to be a high scoring game. My buddy Frank at quarterback is going to do some things for UTSA. Clayton Tune at Houston's going to do things. They're going to sling it around here. It's probably going to be perhaps a 40s to 30s type of 70-plus point shootout. And to your point, they lost a lot of personnel as well, and I think neither of these defenses is overly great. Although Houston does have a really good group of pass rushers. They can get after the ball. And that's the one thing that I'm concerned about if I'm UTSA, and that's why I won't touch the line, because they're going to keep him running around and do a lot of different things with pressure. But I like the over on this one because I think you get 2 quality quarterbacks who could really put up a lot of numbers.
For sure. And you were talking about the defenses and what they lost. That's what has me leaning towards the under. I don't see as much value on the side, although I'd probably lean towards Houston on that if I had to bet the side.
You mean the over, not the under, right?
The over, yeah. But my adjusted line on the side was Houston -6, but on the over under, it's 62, I think, live. My adjusted line on that one is 65, but that's just last year's data. I think there's even more reasons to suggest that this is going to be a super duper high scoring game. You go to last year's Houston team, you recall they jump up in Holgerson's third year, and you knew that early on Holgerson, he'd been doing that stuff of redshirting all the different guys like in his first year and stuff like that. Yeah. He had gotten the experience, for the younger guys, and now the roster had sort of been built up. We typically associate Dana Holgerson with being this, offensive whiz kid, mastermind kind of a guy with the explosive offenses. Last year's team was actually led by the defense. They had Houston had an absolutely nasty defense last year. And now they've lost several of the best players on that defense. Logan Hall, who had been one of their pillars for several years. You could do so much with Logan Hall with the versatility, moving him around. He could defend the run and the pass. David Anai, the edge rusher, who I don't believe he was drafted, but he put up great numbers at Houston. Marcus Jones, the awesome cornerback they had, who was also, awesome on special teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That Houston's defense is going to be, they're going to take a step back. We don't know how far it's going to be, but with how little returning talent and experience, or I shouldn't say talent, but with how little returning experience they have, and with how good they did last year, we know that they're going to regress at least a little bit on that side. But their offense probably is going to be better. That's the part where they bring back almost everyone.
Even without McCaskill. McCaskill's out for the year, and he was their leading rusher last season. But the offense for Houston is extremely dangerous. And there's two NFL guys. I love Clayton Tune. I think he's going to be that group of five guy that everybody falls in love with. And Nathaniel Dell at wide receiver, anybody who sort of scouts the NFL and the NFL draft knows that dude is a guy. 13-29 last year, 12 touchdowns. Even without McCaskill, this offense is good. So to your point, over. But how fun is it going to be for people who've never seen Frank Harris play? I mean, he's just so fun to watch. And like you said, that Houston defense has lost a lot, especially on the back end. To me, he's gonna do some fun things. So over.
Yeah, you're gonna enjoy Frank Harris. Frank Harris, one of the more underrated quarterbacks, I think, in the entire nation. He's a legitimate dual threat who is ridiculously productive through the air, and I think that's what might surprise people when if they weren't paying attention to UTSA last year. UTSA also brings back a very good receiving core. Franklin, Clark, they go deep as well. What you're losing is Sincere McCormick, so you're going to have to figure that out. They had brought in the transfer from Arkansas, who I thought was going to run away with the job. I thought that they were viewing him as the next McCormick, but I've been seeing out of camp, it looks like they were going to start Brady. Blanket on the first day, but the returning kid, that they had a running back. It looked like Brady's going to be their starting running back. So maybe Traylon Smith comes in off of the bench. But I'm not going to touch the side on this one again, just because there's so many guys that left, defections and stuff like that. I can't completely get my finger on both the teams qualitatively. But like Mike was mentioning, I have the same bet on the total. I really like the over for the reasons that we were just stating. Both of these offenses bring back almost everybody except for Sincere McCormick. And you mentioned the McCaskill injury, but they should be able to replace him with between Brandon Campbell and then Tajon Henry, more or less enough, and then lean on the passing game foot, I guess. And so I'm going to go over on that one as well. Again, the 62 was the line on that. 65 for the what was my adjusted over under on that. So I like the over. Going to the next one, Mike, same time slot, 3:30 Eastern. A team that way off the radar, but a Power 5 team that some sickos in our industry are sort of circling as a potential sleeper team. Not a sleeper team for the title or anything like that, but a sleeper team of this team was god awful last year, and they might be frisky this year. So sort of like Pittman's first year, where it's like,
well, come on, no. It's first of all, okay, yeah, people are crazy. You're right. I mean, they're 1-11 football team. They got Delora. They've got a nice freshman in McMillan, but Arizona is who you're talking about. There's absolutely no chance on earth that they're going to be any sort of Pittman team.
Wow, yeah. you're throwing cold water all over the Arizona hype.
I am.
Wow.
Why is there hype? I mean, I don't understand it. From a recruiting aspect, yeah, Tatoria McMillan was a great get.
He's starting today.
Wide receiver, giraffe-looking dude, 6'5". But I will tell you this: I mean, this is just my intel on it.
Okay.
And this isn't to throw shade on the kid or anything. I don't think he loves football. I don't think he's physically tough. So I worry that he's going to get hurt. And I worry that, the hype around Arizona is going to fall flat. They're going to win more than one game, but they're going to get, I'm passing on this game. I know you've got Arizona covering. I think you're going to be disappointed in Arizona, just like you were. You knew you were going to be disappointed in New Mexico, but I am not on Arizona at all. I'm just not.
Wow. Okay. I'm behind the fighting Jed Fish is. I'm sort of bullish on what he's doing so far. Last year, you had to look through the weeds for it, but there was signs of progress. Like specifically on defense, they played harder. They were better than they'd been the year before. You're projecting more of that improvement now, and especially the offensive improvement is what you're going to see this fall.
Yes.
Arizona was one of the very few teams one of those teams where they finished with both the top 25 recruiting class and the top 25 portal class. Jed Fish did a really good job. You were mentioning Jaden DeLora at quarterback. It's hard to undersell how big of an upgrade that will be based on what they had last year going to DeLora. I don't think DeLora is like an NFL guy at all, but he can stay in the pocket and hit kids open. He's a good rhythm thrower and stuff like that. Way better than what they had before. The receiving core, the talent of that has gone way up. You mentioned McMillan, the true freshman. He is going to start. Fish put out the depth chart in the last couple of days. He's going to be starting across from Jacob Cowing, who came up from UTEP, who was awesome last year, and a guy that you can pound with targets as well. Yep. Arizona's receiving core goes from being dog crap to now being legitimately feisty. That's a solid receiving core. I think Arizona has different pieces here, whereas San Diego State, they should be down a little bit, based on from last year. They lost some stuff. The way that they play, Arizo, on the team last year, and obviously, what's happened with the rise and stuff like that. But like last year's team was so good with the field position thing, and they do the defense, and they always have I consider them the Wisconsin of the G5. It's like Wisconsin with palm trees with the physical rushing attack and stuff like that. They might try to pass it a little bit more this year, without having the stud running backs like you had in some of those years past, like with Pumphrey and with Penny. They also have a pretty good receiver in this Jesse Matthews kid that I like. It's just that I think Arizona has taken a couple big steps forward in terms of talent. You now have continuity with the coaching staff coming back. This line live, games in San Diego. San Diego State is favored by 6. It's come down a little bit. The open was like 7 or 6.5, something like that. So it's come down just a bit. My adjusted line on it is San Diego State -1.5. So I'm showing about 4.5 points of line value on Arizona, the side that I like. The total is much closer between my numbers and what we're seeing live. Total on the game is 46.5. My adjusted total on it is 44. So I'm going to be passing on that. It looks like Mike's passing on both sides, but I am going to be. I do have tickets on Arizona this week.
And I've heard some fall injury issues. Nothing serious is going to put them out, but nagging injury issues for DeLora, for Cowing. And I was excited as well. The upgraded quarterback and Cowing, I think, is a tremendous football player. I had him, potentially putting up, Jordan Addison numbers in the Pac-12 because he's going to be targeted that much. Different wide receiver, of course, but just some of the things I hear out of fall camp just kind of discouraged me a little bit against that. And Brady Hoke's not going to throw the ball.
Might a little bit.
I don't think he's going to. Again, I was wrong. What I said, Bielema, the first time, DeVito throws an incompletion, they're going to go back to the run game. Well,
exactly.
It was one game later that they did that because Chase had 150 carries last night in the loss.
Thor was very upset about the ending of that game. It cost Thor a bit, including a big parlay ticket.
Parlay, yeah. So the thing with it is he's offensive-minded, and Bielema is a defensive coach, but he's an offensive-minded conservative guy. You saw with Pry last night too. They're just not going to let you open things up, and that's kind of how I see San Diego State. I think they're a better football team at 6.5 on DraftKings right now over Arizona. I wouldn't touch that line, but I just think you're going to be disappointed in the Arizona hype.
We'll see. I'm riding it, fighting Jet Fishes.
Go ahead.
Moving to now we're jumping to 6 p.m. Eastern in the schedule. We got Lincoln Riley's debut. Lincoln Riley and the USC Trojans are welcoming in Rice a team sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum in talent, but also in continuity, a thing in favor of Rice, where they have a lot of guys coming back, have the staff coming back. USC, they are as changed as any contender that we've seen change year over year in terms of coaching staff, in terms of schemes, in terms of personnel on both the offensive and the defensive sides of the ball. Live right now, the spread USC minus 32.5 is what I was seeing. The over-under on this one is 61.5. Mike, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think you and I are going to agree on this one because of the changes, because of how many roster changes there are. I mean, it's essentially, aside from the offensive and defensive lines, everything is new everywhere. Wide receiver, running back, quarterback, linebacker, defensive back. I mean, you have so much personnel change at USC that it's going to take a little bit to get rolling. So we don't think they're going to win. Like, we don't think Rice is going to win this football game in any way, shape, or form. But that number is high. It's an opening game. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Lincoln Riley to put up big numbers. He's going to want to showcase Caleb Williams. He's going to want to showcase the offense. I think this could be a typical USC limp to the finish 21-point victory where everybody's going to be upset because they should have won by 40. And Bloomgren's a solid coach. He's a good game plan guy. And I think he's going to do whatever it takes to sort of keep this game within reach. I mean, I'm talking about a 3-touchdown loss, but I don't think it's going to be a 40-point blowout. I got Rice covering this line.
I agree. And I'm with you on that. Bloomgren, the former Stanford offensive coordinator under David Shaw. By the way, when David Shaw was having success at Stanford, it was with Mike Bloomgren. But he has brought the same sort of ethos to Rice in terms of the clock control, playing very slow. I think you called these teams turtles last week, the teams that play super duper slow. They don't want to snap the ball quickly. Every single time, it's like when the play clock gets down to 3 or 2 or whatever. That's more, I think people maybe associate that with him more. I don't think they associate that pace of play with Lincoln Riley as much, but Lincoln Riley's teams have never been the up-tempo, like breakneck pace teams. The last 3 years at Oklahoma, they ranked in the 90s overall out of 130 teams in adjusted pace. So, Oklahoma, they had the explosive offenses, but it wasn't the sprint back to the line every time and try to snap it as quick as possible. And because of that, you have two teams here that are, you would project them to be 90s or below in pace that are playing each other in a game with a horribly inflated line and an inflation of a line that we can pretty easily explain as perceptual. It's all you're basically, if you want to bet on USC, you're paying a tax because of the Lincoln Riley excitement and the excitement around the program from this offseason. That tax, according to my numbers, right now it's roughly 5 points. So if you want to bet Rice, my numbers are telling you you're basically getting the 5 free points. Plus, it's a game script that would seem to be advantageous for the underdog. The other thing the underdog has going for it's the thing I mentioned before about the continuity. They have, I think, 7 starters back on offense. It's something similar to that on defense. And of course, their players are not nearly as good. But on the USC side, everyone has been swapped out, and it's going to take a bit. I do think USC's offense is going to be awesome right from the jump, but their defense, the defensive coaches, Alex Grinch and some of the position guys, they've expressed some pessimism in their public comments in recent weeks about how quickly, or the lack thereof, that unit is coming together. So I think they're trying to prepare the fan base for a slower acclimation process for the defense than we're going to see on offense. For all those different reasons, I'm definitely leaning towards I have a Rice. Take it. We're both on Rice in this one.
Take Rice, and you'd never hear that again. Again, my horrible football team thing. But in this case, you're right. The hype. I mean, USC, they're like the betting favorite on futures everywhere to win the national championship. Not betting favorite, but like they're in the realm of real football teams, like plus, I don't know, 700 or something. Like the hype is just outstandingly insane, and it's really going to just inflate their lines all year long. And I'm not saying bet against USC all season, but in this one with new personnel and a slow attack from Bloomgren, take Rice to stay within that 32.5.
1,000%. The same kickoff time, 6 p.m. Eastern. Game a little bit off the radar, but it's intriguing to me because it's our newest entry. We're welcoming a new team into the FBS. Middle Tennessee travels to James Madison for James Madison's debut as a full member of the FBS. This is a line that's been doing some interesting things where earlier this week, like when it dropped, James Madison was more like a 7-point favorite. It was at 6.5 for most of the week. And you've seen now in over the past 24 hours, it's tick down. Last time I saw it, it was James Madison -5 in my
4.5 now. 4.5 4.5 on DraftKings right now.
Wow. We'll see as we get closer to kickoff, you know, what ends up happening there. But the line there's clearly money coming in on Middle Tennessee, which isn't terribly surprising to me. My adjusted number on this game is James Madison -1.5. So I always saw it as closer to a pick 'em. Mike, do you have any thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, well, my first thought is that you are an amazing college football nerd, because when I saw this on the rundown, I'm like, why on earth would this be of interest to any human being on earth, short of Middle Tennessee and JMU fans? And the line kept going down because you put it out there and I kept seeing it go down. And I'm like, you know something about this matchup. I mean, I wouldn't touch it with a 1,000-foot pole, because I don't know what's happening with that line and why it's moving. And I don't know enough about these two teams to really feel confident in either the over or the line itself. What I do like is the line movement, and that's kind of why we're focusing on this. But I would not touch this game.
I'm definitely touching it. I have tickets on Middle Tennessee, both on the line. I think the spread that I got was 6.5, and also on the money line as well.
Good value.
Yeah, and you never know 1,000% if the market's going to be with you on a game like this, but I definitely agree with where this one is moving. Of course, James Madison was a team all summer that I saw as one of the most overrated relative to where they actually are. Vegas had put out their, and this is where I first spotted it. Vegas had put out their adjusted win total, or their over under the win total at 6.5. James Madison only plays 11 games this year, and I think all of them but one are against FBS teams. So you had an 11-game schedule, 10 against FBS teams, but they were being projected to go 6-5, I guess for the overbettors it would be 7-4. But when you look, and James Madison, of course, as you know, has been one of the better FCS teams going back several years. But if you go back and you look at the last 4 or 5 teams that have been sort of FCS powers and then jumped into the Sun Belt, you do have a couple exceptions to this, but overall, like that group of teams is like Appalachian State, Georgia Southern, maybe Coastal Carolina, Georgia State, maybe, is like that sort of thing. Those teams, their first season in the Sun Belt was lower than this. Like, it was like an average of like 4 wins out of, like a 4-8 sort of a start, on average. And again, Vegas was telling us that if you're betting the over on James Madison, you have to go to 7-4. So I was like, what's going on here? My adjusted win total on James Madison was 4.6. You do have an FCS power, yes, but it takes sort of a logical leap to assume that they're immediately going to be one of the best teams in their FBS conference, and that was sort of what was the implication here. On the Middle Tennessee, and also, by the way, I'll say James Madison lost several guys, which I don't think the market's accounting for either. Their quarterback, who last year, he had like a 41-4 touchdown to interception rate, threw for over 4,000 yards. He graduated. He's gone. They had multiple transfers out. One of them went to South Carolina. So, we'll have to see on that. So they brought in Todd Centeio from Colorado State.
That's a lot of Todd Centeio hate there.
I do not care for Todd Centeio, but maybe, Todd Centeio is stuck with Steve Adazio. We're not big Steve Adazio fans of it.
I mean, now he's got a new lease on life.
New lease on life. And by the way, so does the Middle Tennessee offense, an offense that now brings in a guy that has been an air raid guru at the subdivision levels. And they're a team that has the personnel for that. Stockstill, he's always recruiting sort of those small, shifty receivers. And for several years now, he hasn't done the best with the running game. So leaning into the quick hitting passing game even more, I think is probably a good thing for them. I like Middle Tennessee way more than the market does. This line to me should be more like a pick 'em. I'm totally on Middle Tennessee on that one.
Well, last question for you on this is that MTSU was supposed to play Missouri in the opener this year. Okay. Missouri backed out. Do you think it's going to be positive for MTSU because we were ready to play a Power 5 team? We're preparing for that, all that stuff. Or do you think it's going to be a letdown like, oh, we got James Madison to replace him on the schedule. We got this.
I think you have the veteran coach in Stockstill. If you don't think that guy over the last couple of weeks, several times was showing the team, this is what the public thinks of you. You are a 6-point underdog to a team that has never even played at this level before. Nobody believes in you. I think there was a lot of that stuff going on. And I think the schematic changes that they made are going to tick the team up as well. So I think you're going to get really good effort out of them. I think you're going to get the better offensive production as well. I like Middle Tennessee in that one. I like him to spring the upset.
Coach advantage, too. I mean, the guy's been around since 2006, has seen everything, smart enough not to jump. This is a very, very good football coach. So, I'm not touching it, but I see why you like MTSU.
We are getting into the evening games now. We got another biggie, Mike.
I love this game.
7 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Utah at Florida. This line has been jumping around a little bit. It was at 2.5, then it was down to 2, then it was at 3. But I think live right now it is at Utah minus 2.5 at Florida. Mike, what are your thoughts on this one?
I love this game, man, because there's just such a cockiness in the Florida fan base right now. It's 2.5. So Florida's getting 2.5 at home against Utah. There's such a cockiness in two different ways. Anthony Richardson is a god, and listen, talent-wise, athletically, he is a outstanding prospect. If he puts everything together, you could be talking about a guy who's going to be pushing Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud at the top of the NFL draft boards. But he's been hurt a lot. 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last season. Florida's going to run the football. And Utah is going to run the football. If you like running football games, you're going to enjoy this game because it's going to be power on power. Billy Napier wants to establish that run. But Utah, man, a lot of people just got one brief look at Utah last year, which was against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and Jackson Smith and Jigba was just tearing them apart. But they were missing 3 of their defensive backs in that game. They have a very good defense, very strong defense. Cam Reiser is a solid quarterback who could do things with his feet. The running game is strong. I like Utah here to go into the swamp and cover. And I love that 2.5 because it was at 3 at one point, and I hated that. But I think Utah is going to win this game. I believe 51.5 is a little low, and I just talked about all the running attacks. But that seems like a low over to me as well. So I would lean towards the over and Utah if you want to parlay it.
Yeah, and my numbers on that with the total, my adjusted line on that is 60. So it would be leaning in that sort of same direction. My adjusted spread on the game itself is Utah minus 3. I lean even more heavily towards, or I like Utah even more than my numbers do. This is a game we talked a lot about over the summer, in part because the books made a mistake by opening Florida as a favorite. The market has corrected that for them. I thought by the time, well, and we'll see by the time it gets to kickoff. I think this game's more like a minus 3. So, and it was there for a little bit, then it toggled back. We'll see by the time we get to kickoff. But Utah, they have the continuity that Florida doesn't. You have it at the important spots. You have it at quarterback. You have it at running back. And of course, on the coaching staff, they have one of the longest tenure coaches in college football. Utah's good at every level of the defense. They even restocked the linebacking core, which had lost Devin Lloyd. You restock it by stealing a player from the roster you're about to face in Florida in Muhammad Diabate, which should be a 1-for-1. Diabate, not that, he's not quite as good as Lloyd, but we'll replace him fine. Utah's strong up front, strong in the secondary. You have 4 starters back on the offensive line. Tavian Thomas, one of the best running backs in America. You mentioned Cam Rising. The whole constitution of that Utah offense changed when he came in. The ceiling shot way up because now you had a dual threat kid in a way that Charlie Brewer was not. He could also throw the ball 20-plus yards in a way that the Charlie Brewer could not. The whole ceiling of the whole thing changed after that. I like this Utah team a lot. I think they're a dark horse to win. Or I think that they're a dark horse in the college football playoff. Certainly, I like them to win the Pac-12, and I have tickets on that. I also took they were like in the marketplace, very, very high odds for, as far as winning the title. So I took that, on the long shot. They're one of my sort of long shot ones. But I like Utah. And then the other thing with Florida, I'm bullish on Napier long term for sure there. But in the first game, I think it's a bridge too far to expect that guy to be able to defend his home turf against a Utah team that seems to be constructed to go exactly at what Florida's weaknesses have been in recent years. The offensive line coach under Mullen was super duper maligned. They haven't gotten the offensive line figured out for a couple of years. It should be a little bit better in one sense because Napier brought one of this NFL offensive guard with him from Louisiana that transferred over with him.
Yeah, Osiris Torrance. Awesome player.
So the offensive line should be a little bit better, but like to go from where it has been to where it needs to be, that's an enormous gulf, especially when you're considering facing the super active, super big Utah defensive front. And then the defense was the other thing. Now you've swapped out the different coaches and some of the personnel is a little bit different, but they've had some issues. And now you're facing this Utah team that is just super duper efficient. The running game is awesome. You have the 2 tight ends as well. They have one of the best tight end rooms in America as well. Yep. I think it's asking a lot for Florida to be able to start off as quickly as they would need to be able to win this matchup.
Yeah, and you don't think of Utah as a power, like a highly explosive offense, but they've gone over in 12 of the last 17, 5 of the last 5 on the road. They put up points. The number is usually lower in Utah football games for some reason. The spread scares me because the swamp is the swamp and it's a travel across the country and there's a lot of expectations for Utah. But that under, and there's a kid I want you to watch when you're watching that football game. His name's Lander Barton. Okay, now he is going to be the next, Lander Barton is going to be the next great linebacker, not just at Utah, but in the Pac-12 and in the country. True freshman starting at the stud position. Watch this kid. Mohamed Diabate gets the mentions because he's coming from Florida over to Utah, but Landon Barton is going to be the difference maker on that defense now in his sophomore year, in his junior year, and he's going to have that Lloyd type of projection. He's so special. I wanted to put him higher on my true freshman list, and I just want to see him in a game, but I think he has a chance to be amazing and really make a difference for that defense.
Love that intel. Jumping, Mike. The next 2 I'm gonna group together because these are both enormous favorites and name brands against poor G5 teams. Yeah. 2 of them. Alabama this game kicks off at 7:30 Eastern tonight. Is a 41.5 point favorite hosting Utah State, who we saw open up last week. Not as impressive as we thought they would be against UConn. And then the other one kicking off 30 minutes later at 8 p.m. Eastern. Texas hosting UL Monroe. We're going to get to see Quinn Ewers for the first time with the Bolts flying in the FBS. That line is Texas minus 37.5. With these games, with these enormously inflated spreads of these top 10 teams heading in, do you see any angles on either of these 2 games, Mike?
Yeah, I'm a pass on Texas ULM because I just don't know how happy we're going to have to keep Hudson Card. I got some props in that game for later that I want to talk about, but how happy are we going to keep Hudson Card? How much are we going to want to showcase Quinn Ewers? How important is this game for Sark to win big and for the offense to play out? How much they want Bijan Robinson in New York? So will he be the guy who carries the ball? Like, there's so many questions. They're going to win this game. Xavier Worthy, is he going to have a 3 touchdown game? It's just how they win. So I wouldn't touch the line. I wouldn't touch the over because you could have all those guys I mentioned sitting down in the third quarter and not playing. Or you could have Texas do what Texas does, like they did against Kansas last year and just struggle. And then that, whatever the line, it was 37.5. That could be a nightmare line for you. You could just be watching that game over and over throughout the evening. It's 37.5 still and be like, we're never going to get to that number. So I don't like it. I'm not touching it. I got some props for Texas. Alabama, I'm taking. What I saw from Utah State last week was really unimpressive. It was alarmingly unimpressive defensively, offensively. They're obviously missing a lot of their playmakers. Logan Bonner was not himself. They just looked like a team that is not ready to go into a slaughterhouse, and that's what they're heading into. 41.5 is a lot, but when it's Nick Saban, it's never a lot. That's kind of been my motto over the last decade. I don't really care what the line is for Alabama. I like them to just win this game and win it by 50.
Yeah. And you're sort of doing like sitting in the pop psychology chair with a couple of those, which you sort of have to do with some of these bigger spreads. Alabama, like you say, Nick Saban recent years have been covering these huge spreads way better. Sort of like what we were talking about with Harbaugh a little bit ago, where in recent years, Saban had like this terrible record against the spread in these games with the inflated lines. But in recent years, I believe it might even be covering the last 4 of them with the inflated spread. So, look for them to get after them. And Utah State was a team that I was not terribly impressed with. We mentioned it from the perspective of UConn, but Utah State, I mean, that was not a fluke that UConn played with them the entire game. And if UConn's starting quarterback had not gotten injured right away in that game, UConn definitely may have won it, and it would not have been a fluke. So Utah State stinks, but it's just that one's too hard for me with how many how many different points there is. I'd probably lean Alabama, like Mike's play on this game, because my line on it is Alabama minus 44.5. So it looks like I got like a 3-point overlay on Alabama. It's going to come down to the motivation of it and stuff like that. But if recent history is any indication, Alabama would be the side on that one. With the total of that game was 63. My adjusted total on it was 71. Again, it's going to come down a lot to what Nick Saban's prerogative is. I out of those 71, maybe you can count on 10 points from Utah State. I don't know that you can count on many more from them. So it's a lot of it's going to be Alabama's prerogative. I would stay away from both those. I'm also passing on the Texas game outside of the props. Mike has a couple interesting ones on that one that I agree with him on. We're going to be talking about props right when we wrap up the games. We just have a couple more. So we'll, Mike will get to explain those to you. I think that's where the value is from that game, as opposed to trying to guess how much Sark wants to, throw it, run it up, different stuff like that against Monroe. How long is he going to play Bijan? Some of these different questions. I would pass on that one as well. Moving to a game that might be a little bit more competitive. This one moving back to 7:30 Eastern. Memphis traveling to Mike Leach's Mississippi State Bulldogs. Live line on this one is ticked up a bit. Mississippi State minus 17. Who do you like in this one, Mike?
I like the over. I don't like the game. I don't like the line. I think 17 is a little bit much to lay. I have concerns about Mississippi State's defense. You never, ever, ever know what Mike Leach is thinking or going to do. You assume he's going to throw the ball 60 times. You assume that is going to be, a safe bet that they're going to put up a lot of points. And in that, speaking, the 57.5 over-under line to me is a little bit puzzling. So I like the over in this, but I don't like the game. Okay.
Yeah. With how far the side that the line is ticked up, now I'm a little bit more tenuous on whether I'll actually place a bet on this one. I was showing a little bit of value earlier in the week on Mississippi State, which was more about I'm out on Memphis until that Silverfield guy's gone. Not a big fan of his. So until he's gone, I'm going to keep betting against Memphis whenever I get an opportunity to. But now with where this line has gone to, I'm not sure that this is the spot to do it, because it looks like the markets at least was with me on this one. My adjusted line on this one, it's Mississippi State minus 16.9. So it's right in line with what the Vegas number is. Not sure if you're getting any sort of an edge there. And then with the total, I'm within 3 of it. It's 57.5. I'm at 60.5 as far as that goes. I'll probably pass on that. I would lean towards Mississippi State as far as the pick goes, depending on the line that you get it at. 17 might be that's where you have to start thinking long and hard, because that's where we've hit the key number. But I would definitely lean towards Mississippi State there. if it ticks up to 17.5, that would probably be a pass for me.
Yeah, it's 17 as we speak, and I think it will tick up. So, I think we were in agreement. I think there's two solid quarterbacks here. Nobody knows Seth Hennigan, but, between him and Rodgers, they're going to put up points. So I like the over. I'm going to take the over in this, actually.
Okay. So Mike is on the over. I'm leaning Mississippi State on that one. Mike, the marquee game of today, all the eyes will be on it in Columbus. 7:30 kickoff Eastern on this game. Notre Dame traveling to Ohio State. Marcus Freeman's debut for the Fighting Irish. This line has come down. It looks like it's minus 16 live for Ohio State. Who do you like in this one?
I like Ohio State. It is 16 live right now. And I like the over, 58.5 right now. I would parlay this, honestly. It's one of those things where when you look at matchups, you try to figure out a way that the team can slow down an Ohio State type of offense. You do the same thing with Alabama and some other offenses. And I haven't figured out a way yet. And I'm not Marcus Freeman. I'm not a defensive, guru. I'm not as smart as these guys X knows wise, but I just can't figure it out. They're going to want to run the football game. Notre Dame run the football. Notre Dame wasn't able to do that last year with a better running back. They've got Chris Tyree. They don't have a lot of playmakers at wide receiver. You got Buckner as a new quarterback. They might play tight, and if they have a few 3 and outs, this Ohio State team can put up 7 on you in a minute and 10 seconds, sometimes less. And Ryan Day is going to put his foot on the pedal. So I think this could be a potential 30 to 40 point blowout on national television for Marcus Freeman's debut, because I just cannot figure out a way. Yeah, they got Brandon Joseph to replace Kyle Hamilton. They have a solid front. The defense is okay, but they've lost too many components to slow down Trevion, Milan, CJ Stroud, Smith and Jigba, Harrison, Ikbuka, Fleming. The offensive line is good, and the defense of Ohio State is much better. It's quicker, it's faster, it's younger. They've got an influx of talent. They help the back end. Jim Knowles is an upgraded defensive coordinator. Everything about this screams to me an Ohio State route.
Yeah, and I think the point that you made about getting Jim Knowles for the Ohio State defense, that's the key one here for me. Certainly don't expect any drop-off whatsoever from the Ohio State's offense, despite losing the 2 first-round receivers for the reasons that you mentioned. You have all these 5-stars that are ready to just jump in immediately and replace them, and then you have one of the nation's best quarterbacks, one of the best 2, one of the nation's best 2 running backs. So, and then the offensive line, like you said. So that part of it's going to be fine. The defense is the thing that in big games in recent years you've had question marks about. They've been gouging some big spots, lost some games because of that. You go out and you get Knowles, one of the game's best defensive coordinators. You think about the difference between like Kerry Coombs when they were, the players were put into bad spots. There was some confusion, stuff like that. Going from that to like a mastermind type like Jim Knowles is an absolutely enormous upgrade. I can tell you that Ohio State is super bullish inside their building about how this defense is going to be this year. Like they think this is going to be a top 10 unit, maybe even top 5. Like they're dreaming high on this defense. And Knowles is only forwarding that. He is super bullish as well. Notre Dame, it's going to take a little bit of time, I think, for them to acclimate. The coaching staff, they do have continuity in terms of those guys were in the building last year. But, Marcus Freeman, head coach for the first time, this is a tough spot for him to open up. You have the new starting quarterback full-time in Tyler Buckner. We saw him as sort of like a change-up pitch that Brian Kelly would use off the bench last year. Now he's got to be the dude, and he can't struggle because then behind him, you don't have as much depth. I guess it would be Drew Pine, whatever. I do like Ohio State in this game. My numbers do too. My line on this game is Ohio State minus 19.7. So I'm going to agree with Mike on the side bet. I also agree with Mike's lean towards the over. My adjusted total on this game is actually 74. I don't know if Vegas is a little bit tepid on some of the offenses, whether it's because of the first round receivers leaving or what, but I think both these offenses are going to be very, very good. So despite what I just said about the Ohio State defense, I definitely would lean over as well. So both Mike and I like the Buckeyes tonight. Just a couple more games we're going to discuss here, and then we're going to move to DFS and props talk. We got an 8:00 kickoff here in the Carrier Dome. Louisville heading there tonight. Louisville has gone up to now 5.5 point favorite. I think live Mike, what do you think about that one?
I like Louisville. It's funny because in the offseason, I wasn't bullish on Louisville and the future of the program under Satterfield and all that stuff. And I've changed my mind throughout the offseason. And like what changed in the offseason? Not a lot, except for the perception of the football program internally. There's a lot of confidence when you're talking about this team. Tyon Evans is a big transfer. He's going to be their starting running back. That was big. They lost Farrell. So where's the wide receiver skill and speed? Well, Tyler Hudson, D. Wiggins are both very, very good football players. They've got targets. Malik Cunningham is that X factor guy in the ACC who could just be unstoppable and have a difficult season. You just don't know. But defensively, they've got a lot of players. They added Jermaine Lowell from Arizona State, who's a guy in the middle. They got Yahya Diaby. They got Yasir Abdullah. They've got guys that can make plays on defense, wreak havoc. Syracuse has nothing. They got Sean Tucker. Everybody's going to put 8 in the box. I love him. I do, but I feel bad for him because he can't really match up to what he did last season, because that's the game plan against Syracuse. Just, let Dino Babers hurt himself by trying to throw the ball when they don't really have a lot of talent there. So I think Tucker gets stuffed. I think Louisville covers this spread.
Yeah, I definitely lean Louisville as well. But I think a lot of the stuff that this game is going to be informed by, it's what you're sort of talking about with what are we going to see from this Syracuse offense. When Babers sort of made that indictment of Tommy DeVito and then, had given the team over to Garrett Schrader, they just philosophically, they had to do what they had to do, which is just run the ball. Schrader, he's basically just like Nick Fitzgerald, like one of those guys, where it's like accuracy averse, but like a big, big dual threat quarterback, physical runner as well. Now, though, Syracuse brings in this offensive staff that have been with Bronco Mendenhall at Virginia, Robert Anae being the main one. Robert Anae loves the short passing game. And so what's going to be interesting to me is, are they going to try to incorporate that more to go along with Tucker, where maybe you get some of those guys out of the box, but you don't trust Schrader's accuracy? Like, were they able to fix anything where at least he could complete the pass, but 5 yards of the line of scrimmage to at least, sort of add another pitch to their repertoire to keep, people from sitting dead red on the Tucker fastball? That'll be interesting to watch there. I don't have as many questions about Louisville. And Mike, I had your sort of same progression with Louisville this offseason, where coming out of last year, you're not super bullish on Scott Satterfield. Scott Satterfield was feeling the heat. His president, was gone from when he got hired. The AD was swapped out from when he got hired. New guys were in. He's starting to, really feel the heat, be on the hot seat. So, and you could see this manifest through the transfer portal. He was recruiting the transfer portal like a friggin' banshee this offseason and won several of these high-profile recruiting battles for these transfers. Jermaine Lowell is a great example of this. When he announced that he was leaving Arizona State, everyone and their mother was trying to get Jermaine Lowell to sign with them to be a plug-and-play starter on the defensive line. Louisville ends up beating out a bunch of teams. Wasn't the only high-profile transfer derby, battle that Scott Satterfield ended up winning. I think their defense ticks way up, Louisville, because of all these transfers that were added. That was the side of the ball specifically that they were focusing on through the portal. And then the offense, we know that that's going to be good. Cunningham's super good. They have a deep stable of backs. You mentioned you do lose Farrell, but you're able to swap him out. I like this Louisville team. I do think that they cover. One last game before we jump to props and DFS quick to close out the show. We'll be done in about 15 minutes. Boise State travels to Oregon tonight, 10:30 Eastern kickoff, in a game with a very close line. Live right now, it's Oregon State -2.5, a game that's in Corvallis. Mike, what are your quick thoughts on this one?
Quick thoughts are, I like Oregon, and I know we're going to disagree on this one probably, but Chance Nolan's solid. They've got good playmakers, but this is at home. It's going to be sold out. There's a lot of positivity around Jonathan Smith in this program, and there's a lot more confidence from what I hear coming out of Corvallis than I've heard in a long, long time. So that doesn't mean that they're going to be world beaters or compete in the Pac-12 North or do anything special. But normally I would look at this game and be like, Boise State's the better team, and they're going to go there and win this football game. I think that the home advantage That place rarely rocks, and it's going to rock tonight. And I think that's going to lead them to cover this and win this game outright.
Yeah, so that Mike leans on the Beavers. I lean the other way with the Broncos. We've seen the Broncos in some of these openers, early season games against Power 5 teams have had some success. Oregon State has obviously taken a jump up with Jonathan Smith. Last year they took that step up. This year there's some people that are bullish behind them in the market because they're returning 15 starters. You mentioned the quarterback, stuff like that. But last year's defense was really poor. It got the defensive coordinator fired. I'm not sure how much that's going to tick up because they lost by far their leading tackler and their best defender graduated. Even though you bring back a lot of guys, you lose your tackle machine. And then on offense, you lose BJ Baylor. And it was a run-oriented type offense. Their offensive line had ticked up, everything like that. But is the running game going to stay where it was? Because Chance Nolan is just he's a caretaker for you. You don't want him to be winning the games for you. So is it going to be Damian Martinez back there? Is it going to be Fenwick at running back for Oregon State? We'll have to see. I'm definitely more bullish on Boise State than I am on Oregon State heading into the year. So even though my adjusted line is right on the Vegas spread, I have Oregon minus 2.6. I would lean Boise State for this one. But my adjusted total is also ironically right on the Vegas number. The total in that one's 56. My adjusted total on that's 56.5. I don't think that there's any value to be had there. So Mike is going to be on Oregon State. I'm on Boise State. For the last 10 minutes of the show, wanted to flip it forward to our DFS bets and our prop bets today. Let's start with DFS. I went through and I made my lineup on the afternoon card. So these are like the 3:30 kicks Eastern. I did it on DraftKings, of course. The quarterback that I ended up going with was Watson from Troy. Jared Dagey, who had gone from West Virginia, then he gets Neil Brown doesn't want him anymore, so then he transferred to Western Kentucky. Then he doesn't win that starting job. Then he transferred down to Troy. There had just been a presumption that he was going to just be handed this job. I guess it didn't happen. Watson has beat him out, although Dagey did not have much time to turn around. So we'll see if he can end up stealing it back or stealing it later in the season. But Gunnar Watson's going to be starting this game at Mississippi. Mississippi team that, breakneck fast and everything like that. There's more possessions that are going to be involved in this game, and their defense is the unit that you don't trust. So I think that Troy's going to be able to throw the ball. At my running backs that I went with Byron Cardwell was interesting against Georgia, not because it's the greatest matchup, but because I think you're getting a decent price point on DK right now. It's 5,200. On Byron Cardwell. Cardwell's the guy who's taken over for Travis Dye and was the guy who was better on a per touch basis than Travis Dye previously. So I think, he's at least going to get a bunch of touches tonight. We're hoping, having him in our lineup, that we're going to get a touchdown, maybe 2 out of him. And at that price point, that would be juice worth the squeeze. The other running back spot, I went with a guy sort of similar salary range, 5,800. I mentioned this guy earlier when we were talking about the Houston UTSA game. Tajon Henry, the running back for Houston. He has won that starting job. Mike had mentioned before that Elton McCaskill, their projected starter, he had gotten hurt for the season in the spring. So it was down to Henry against Brandon Campbell, a transfer that they had brought in. And it in their first depth chart that Houston put out, Henry is being listed as RB1. So I'm going to take him at that price point. Taking another Houston guy leading off my receiving core in Nathaniel Tank Dell. Mike and I talked plenty about him during that Houston UTSA breakdown. They just funnel him with so many targets, and they're going to again this year. That's a team that's led by the foot of their passing attack, especially with McCaskill being down, everything like that. Dell's going to get pounded with targets. Last year he had 22.4 average per game on DraftKings points per game. And I'm taking my other receiver one. I'm going to get a big ticket item too. I'm taking Franklin from UTSA, their top guy. So it's the exact same matchup. I want the wide receiver one on the other side too. I mentioned when we were talking about that game that how much Houston had lost on their defense. They lost guys in the secondary. They lost pass rushers, everything like that. Both Mike and I are going over in that game. So by extension, I like several of the offensive guys on both sides. So I wanted Franklin in my lineup. My last receiver, I wanted to get a bit of a value. Mike, I took your boy McMillan from Arizona, who is starting. Well, we'll see how he ends up doing, across from Cowing, but he's only 3,900 at DK. So I figured I'd try that. And the last two guys in my lineup, I'm taking Kenny McIntosh with Georgia, guy who's going to be taking over their starting running back spot. I love that kid's talent, and I think he's going to get just a million touches tonight against Oregon as Georgia tries to control the clock, et cetera. And then my super flex, I took Clayton Tune, the quarterback from Houston, who we had talked about before, compare him with Nathaniel Tank Dell, and hopefully we can do some stuff with that UTSA and Houston game. What do you think about my lineup, Mike?
Not bad. I mean, McMillan, again, I want to see what happens with most true freshmen. I put out my top 50 true freshmen, and I didn't have him in it. And a lot of people were upset about that because he's a 5-star kid. He's going to Arizona. He should get great opportunities and things like that. But I want to see the hunger. I want to see the willingness to be a great football player. So that's interesting. It's less risky than last week. You had two guys that I didn't really care for. And
I should have listened to you.
One didn't play, and one had one carry for 1 yard, I think, or something. And this goes back to just knowing these kids out of high school and knowing the disappointment level of just supposed to be this year. It's supposed to be this year. It's supposed to be this year. And the regression level. And so McMillan is just like stuff that I've been told is like he's just a physically gifted giraffe of a receiver, but we'll see if he wants it. And maybe he can prove me wrong. I've got some props that I think might play into this a little bit, because I'm upset about last night's props. I had two props last night. Chase Brown over 0.5 rushing touchdowns. The dude carried the ball 36 times. I knew he was going to be the bell cow. Their backup running back was out, and he didn't get in the end zone. And I'm just very, very upset about that because everything played out to be the way I expected it to be. And then the other one was Zach Kuntz at Old Dominion, who was supposed to get over 50.5 yards. They threw the ball to him probably 10, 11 times, and they overthrew him numerous times. He's 6'8". That's impossible. So I was really ticked. I went 0-2 on props last night.
The Chase Brown one, particularly heartbreaking. Like they had the one where they were like within the 5, and it was the 4 straight runs with Chase Brown, and they turned it over on downs.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
I do a lot of research into this stuff, and I really look. I watched Illinois play last week on film. Watched the replay of their game, and it's Wyoming and all that stuff. And I know Zach Kuntz from high school and going to Penn State, and I know how excited they are about his development. Now he's a skinny drink of water at 6'8", and he still needs to learn to block. But geez, I knew they were going to target him. I got inside info sometimes on this stuff. But 6'8" get overthrown, and he caught like 2 or 3 passes and was under that 55.5. So hedge your bets against what I'm saying here because I'm 0-2. But Spencer Rattler over 250.5 yards. Georgia State is a sneaky okay football team. I don't think this is going to be a massive blowout. And I think Spencer Rattler has a chip on his shoulder. I think Shane Beamer wants to show everybody that he's got a shiny new toy and that they could throw the ball and pass. I think he's going to go over 300 yards. So when I see over 250.5 on DraftKings minus 115, I'm jumping at it. The other one that I initially looked at was our guy Quinn Ewers. Originally I thought it would be over. Let me pull up the number for you. It's astonishingly low to me for a kid of that talent to be projected to throw under 238.5 yards against Louisiana Monroe at minus 115. But then I thought about it. I thought about the portal. I thought about Hudson Card. I thought about showcasing Bijan Robinson. I thought about all the things because in my mind it was, okay, Sark's going to want Ewers to look great. He's going to want him to throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against Louisiana Monroe. But there's so many other factors here, and he could also be on the bench in the third quarter. Yeah. So take Quinn Ewers under the 238.5, even though it flies in the face of my logic. And then the other one I like is Bijan Robinson in that same game. Over 108.5 rushing yards is minus 115 on DraftKings. He did seven games last season. He went over 108.5, and in another game, he was right around 103. They're going to want to showcase him. He's going to get the ball. They're going to work in that new offensive line. They're going to want to run the football and establish that first and ease Ewers in. So I think Ewers low Bijan high in that football game, and I'm going to prop the heck out of that game. And it's a worthless game, but I just see the props for it.
Yeah, and like we were talking about when we were talking about it, I don't know if there's any value on the side or the total, but I think that's a game where the props are probably where the value is. And if you get an indication, or if you feel bullish that Texas, of course, we know is going to jump out and have the big lead, but bullish that Sark is going to try to get Hudson Card earlier into the game earlier for the reasons that Mike stated, after he stuck around when Quinn Ewers won the job. That definitely would be the indication to go under on Ewers. And Mike's line of thinking behind Bijan, it makes a lot of sense as well, with this being sort of, Texas wanting to get behind him for sort of like a Heisman type campaign. Also thinking about the personnel there, Roschon Johnson at the end of camp had been banged up. Nair is out for the season, the kid that they brought in as well. So, you might even see more, touches funneled into Bijan, or him staying on the field longer than would be typical of a blowout kind of a thing. Although they're going to want to watch his touches this year, because I want to see Bijan get through the entire season healthy. He broke down in November last year, so that'll be interesting to see.
You got to weigh it, especially with Roschon out. But the other thing that's cool is there's a whole lot of more props up this morning on DraftKings. Yesterday when I was writing about the props, there weren't a lot to choose from. And now there's a ton. So go on there. There's just so much fun stuff. Like I just looked at, we were talking about KJ Jefferson, and there's a 46.5 rushing yards for him. I don't think he's going to rush for 50 yards in this football game against Cincinnati. I just don't see it. So I would take the under there, 46.5. But there's a billion of them. Now, Caleb Williams' passing yards to me was kind of interesting. Let me pull it up. It was low. And it was high. I'm sorry, high to me, because we talked about how 268.5, I would take the under. I don't think he's going to throw for that many yards in a game where maybe the possessions are limited. Maybe he's out in the third quarter. All of that stuff. This is like fantasy football in reverse, right? Like you have your teams in the NFL that are going to rest their guys for the playoff, and you don't know what to do. Week one is like that too. Against a team like Rice, you don't know, is he going to throw 35 times or is he going to throw 13 times? So I would take the under there, 268.5 minus 110 on DraftKings for passing yards for Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and you were mentioning the quarterback rushing yards thing vis-a-vis Jefferson. The books put out a couple of different wonky quarterback rushing lines. The Phil Jurkovec one, I'm guessing by now it's been bet way down, but they released Phil Jurkovec's rushing yards crazy high. It was like 45 or 48 or like
43 and a half now.
Take the under. Take the under on that. Phil Jurkovec was a guy who thought he was going to be in the NFL right now. Last year, he gets knocked out in that game against, I think it was Temple, or UMass or something like that. At the beginning of last season in early September, he had to miss most of the season. It's the only reason that he's back. Phil Jurkovec is not looking this year to get outside the pocket and churn out yards and take hits that could potentially compromise that again. He wants to be in the pocket and throw.
I know him and his mentality. I don't know him personally. I don't know anybody personally, but I know him and his mentality. He's not going to be able to stop himself. Now, I agree with you on the under 43.5, but there are going to be numerous instances in this football game against Rutgers of all teams where he's going to risk his life and future outside the pocket because he just can't stop himself.
Well, with that, it's a good note to wrap up on. Thank you guys, everyone, for watching another episode of College Football Game Day Live. That's Mike Farrell. I'm Thor Nystrom. We want to thank you guys out there for watching. We also want to thank our sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook. One last time, if you guys pump in just $5 and make a qualifying $5 bet on DraftKings Sportsbook, you get $200 in free bets instantly. It's the ROI opportunity of a lifetime. Just enter the promo code CFB Pros for that at sign up to get that. Again, that's Mike Farrell. I'm Thor Nystrom. Enjoy your college football Saturday.